Welcome to A Junta and an Anarchy, Part 2. Hopefully, you've just watched Part 1, so I will throw us right into the second part A City of Anarchy. If you remember, anarchy is when there is no government at all, no one in charge, no police, no laws, no nothing. Far and away, the most common cause of anarchy is a civil war. Sometimes, when groups in a country are completely focused on fighting over who's in charge, there's no one actually in charge. The example I'm going to teach about today is different from that, however. This is the location of Hong Kong. Today, it's a city in China, but for a very long time, it was actually controlled by the British. So, the British beat China in a war which the British started in order to get the right to sell drugs to people in China. Man, I wish I had time to talk about that, but it's totally true. The wars are called the Opium Wars, if you're of a mind to look it up on your own. But for our purposes today, the important thing is that after winning their "we get to sell you drugs" war, the British bullied China into letting them rent Hong Kong so they could have a trade base from which they could sell stuff, including drugs, and buy stuff, which was mostly tea, a drink which British people were almost as addicted to as drug addicts are to drugs. China hadn't really built much in the area, but there was a small walled fort. Now, to the British, this little fort with its rock walls wasn't all that impressive, since they had modern guns and cannons that shot exploding cannonballs. The Chinese government insisted that they wanted to keep the fort as a matter of pride, and since the British thought the fort was kind of a joke, they were okay with that. But they made a rule that the Chinese weren't allowed to build anything new there, so that they wouldn't be able to upgrade the fort to modern standards. This lasted for about 100 years. The Chinese got to keep their increasingly super out of date fort, and the British controlled the rest of Hong Kong. Then came World War II, where the Japanese army invaded both China and Hong Kong, where they treated China the way they did the rest of China, burning and destroying much of it. When the war was over and the Japanese were kicked back out again, that left everyone with a problem. Like most of the rest of Hong Kong, the walled fort had been flattened. The British figured they could now forget about the whole stupid ancient fort inside their rented city and were getting ready to build new stuff there when the Chinese protested. Hey, the deal was that the part is the fort. Hey, that's ours. You can't build anything there. The British responded, "Well, neither can you. You're not allowed to build new stuff there either. That was the deal." So, yeah, that left the spot as a legal gray area. The British couldn't do anything with it. The Chinese couldn't do anything with it. It was Kowloon Walled City, a city with no government at all. Is it just me, or does this picture not look like buildings built out of trash? See, there were no laws or rules about how to build anything there. Things didn't have to be pretty, nor did they have to be safe. Here's what it looked like at night. All the buildings were built touching and overlapping with one another, and at its height, about 50,000 people lived in an area of less than 7 acres. This works out to each person having about 40 square feet of space. Imagine a square on the ground, with each side being about 6.5 feet long, and that square is actually slightly bigger than the amount of space each person living there had to themselves. Kowloon Walled City accidentally happened to be in the flight path of airplanes landing at Hong Kong's airport. So, airplanes regularly flew directly overhead, pretty close to the roofs. Speaking of the roofs, since there was no government, there was no trash pickup, so people frequently just tossed their trash out on the roof. The building below is an old temple and was one of the only things to survive the Japanese destruction. Since there were no laws, as you can see, someone simply built a new building above and around the temple. This is what the streets of the city looked like. This picture was taken during the day, but sunlight never made it to the bottom level of the area. As you can see, the ground was constantly wet, not from the rain, but from water pipes above which were not properly put together. Just so you don't think that this picture is an outlier, here's a couple more shots from street level. As you can see, instead of a ceiling overhead, there would be a mass of unsafe wires and leaky pipes, and on the ground, there would be trash littered all about. People who lived there worked in a lot of different jobs. Since there were no laws, if you thought you knew enough to be a doctor or a dentist but had never been to medical school, you could set up your own unlicensed practice and nobody could tell you not to. The man in this picture is working at one of the most common jobs, food processing and preparation. And with no laws, you didn't need to worry about pesky things like cleanliness or health rules. Wouldn't you love to eat something that had been prepared in this room? Other people ran small stores, like this family, who had a little store on the left side of this room and a bedroom for sleeping over on the right. Most of the stuff I've been saying may not sound all that great, but I've left the worst for last. Since there were no laws, Kowloon Walled City was the perfect base of operations for gangs called the Triads, which are Chinese criminal organizations. Groups like the Sun Yi On and the 14K could do whatever they liked inside as long as they didn't bother anyone outside Kowloon Walled City. They would force the non-criminal residents of the city to pay them money, and if you did anything at all to upset one of the criminals, they would kill you right where you stood. With no laws and no police, regular people lived under constant fear of gang violence that could and did break out at any moment. It was this escalating gang activity that finally got the British and the Chinese to agree. This city of anarchy had to go. The British government paid the people living inside it to leave so that they would be able to find new homes somewhere else. And then they flattened the city, and in its place they put a park. The park still stands today, and if you go there, you can still see in that bottom picture some of the remains of the original stone gates that stood in the walls back when it still was a fort. The British finally returned Hong Kong to China in 1997, and this park is all that's left of the city of anarchy. You know, I think that can be our secret word for this video. Park. P-A-R-K, with no capital letters. So, I hope these two videos helped you understand what a junta is and what an anarchy is. We will have a follow-up assignment using the information from these videos. But for now, all you need to do is use the secret words just so I know that you've watched these. And I will send my best wishes for all of you to stay safe and stay healthy.